Collin Poirot. Collin Poirot is a member of the New York Community Action Project. They represent the National Lawyers Guild and attended the really powerful press conference that took place on August 5th in Brooklyn, New York, which was sponsored by the D12 organization in support of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. Collin has taken the stance of joining the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa the Legal Support Defense Committee. And, Carmine, we are just so excited to have them with us today and to do a workshop on what to do if the FBI comes knocking. So I want to appreciate you, Collin, Attorney Collin, for joining us here today. Uhuru.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Hello again, Uhuru, comradely greetings, and thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Great. So again, my name is Collin Poirot. I'm an attorney with the National Lawyers Guild, or the NLG, which you've probably heard about. I've been involved with different anti-imperialist movements and people's struggles for the better part of a decade, and it's really an enormous honor to be here with you all today with these courageous and lifelong freedom fighters in the fight against FBI repression and intimidation. I'm here as a member of the National Lawyers Guild, which again, it's a nationwide organization that was founded to provide legal support to radical movements with radical attorneys. And, and historically we've supported labor struggles, anti-imperialist resistance, civil rights movements, lots of different progressive organizing. But today I've been asked to give just a quick rundown on the best practices and kind of what you can expect and what you should do if you get approached by the FBI for questioning, if the FBI is trying to talk to you, whether they're knocking on your door at home, approaching you in the street, in your car, in your community space, wherever they may approach you. These are going to be some tips that will help keep you and your people safe. And I'm going to go a little bit quickly, but there should be a Q&A at the end of this meeting, and my email is also on this slide in case you want to email me any specific questions. So the next slide, just to get started, the first thing you may be thinking is, why would the FBI approach me? You may think I haven't done anything illegal, so why is the FBI trying to talk to me? Does it mean I'm being arrested or investigated? And the answer is not necessarily. So there are many, many reasons, both real and fraudulent, for why the FBI may approach you and may try to talk to you. So let's start off talking about some of the real reasons why the FBI tries to talk to people. Of course, it's possible that they are investigating you or people you may know, or they could just be fishing for information about people that they assume maybe you're affiliated with them because you're friends on social media or you're on a listserv or something like that. And they may just be fishing for information just to see if you will do them the favor of telling them something that they don't know. But it's also possible that they're simply harassing you for your organizing activities or associations and trying to scare you and stop you from continuing on with that important work. They could be hoping to coerce you into becoming an informant if you tell them something inaccurate during their interview with you, during their conversation. That gives them the opportunity to later come back and say, hey, you lied to us and now we have leverage over you, which again is why I'm going to really emphasize many times in this that we are strongly encouraging you, do remain silent, do not speak to the FBI. On top of those real reasons why they might approach you, they have a whole slew of not very creative to quite creative reasons that they may give you, and they may say, this is why we're here. And these are all false pretexts. So they may say things like, we think you're the target of an identity theft, or we're investigating something and we don't think you were involved, but we just want to confirm you weren't involved with that, were you? Or as happened with Director Akile, they could even say, we think your car has been broken into and we need you to come outside and confirm and see if everything's okay with your car. You should assume the FBI is lying to you. When they approach you, you should assume always that they are not going to tell you the real reason why they want to speak to you. And because of that, the bottom line here is you really cannot know the FBI's true purpose during that initial interaction. They are not required by law to tell you their real reasons, which is why the safest thing to do is to just not engage with them at all at that initial stage. Instead, you really need to stick to some best practices. So the next slide covers the first of those best practices, which is stay silent. This really is the most powerful thing you can do. It's the number one most important thing. You have the right to remain silent with the very narrow exception that if you're stopped in a car You can be, if you're driving, you can be forced to provide proof that you are driving with a valid driver's license. And in some states, you are required to confirm your name if they ask you, but that's it. You are not required to say a single word beyond that. This is the most important thing I'm going to say in this whole training. And it's also sometimes the most difficult thing to do in the moment, because these agents are trained investigators. They spend hours and hours and hours specifically learning how to use persuasion, trickery, and deceit to make a person feel scared or guilty or impolite for refusing to cooperate with the FBI. And you have to put those feelings aside in the moment and remember what I said earlier. The FBI is not going to tell you their real reasons, and they are not your friend. They are not there to help you. They are there hoping you will tell them something they can then use to harm you and your community. On top of that, as I mentioned, you're not going to know their real reasons for wanting to speak with you, so you're simply not going to be in a position to gain anything strategic or useful from an initial conversation with them when they first approach you. A really important thing to remember here is that making a false statement to the FBI is considered a federal crime, and they can use that to arrest you. So this is really important because they use it in really deceitful and cunning and conniving ways. What they'll do is they'll research you ahead of time. They'll find out a bunch of information about you. Then they'll approach you and say, we just want to have a really simple conversation. We're going to ask you just some really casual questions. Were you at this organization's event? Do you know these people? Are you part of this group? They already know the answer to these questions based on their research, because they will thoroughly research your social media, et cetera. And they're hoping you'll say something like, oh, no, I don't really know that person. And then they can use that as a reason to arrest you, which gives them more leverage over you. Again, bottom line, do not answer their questions, because you're really opening yourself up to a trap. So let's say that you do end up answering a few of their questions before you realize, wait a minute, I'm getting a weird vibe. I'm no longer comfortable. I don't want to talk to you anymore until I call my attorney. They are required to respect that. Even if you've already started talking to them, you can end that conversation at any point in time and say, from now on, I don't want to speak to you unless I have an attorney with me. So the bottom line is, the best thing you can do is to stay silent and get the agent's contact information. There is nothing to be gained. Truly, there is nothing to be gained by speaking to an FBI agent without an attorney present. Anything you want to say or your organization decides is useful to say to the FBI, which that's almost nothing, you can say that later with your attorney present, after you've talked to your attorney and your comrades and figured out the risks involved. And if you decide you do want to talk to them, again, don't do it at that initial interaction. That's the bottom line. The only exception is if the FBI is in your home and there is a medical emergency with someone in the house that you need them to know about because life or death is at stake. That's really the only exception where you would want to proactively say something while the FBI is there. But that's usually not the case. So again, that's a rare exception. So what should you say? These are just some sample things you can say. I would recommend repeating them because, again, it's really hard in the moment when you're really nervous and stressed and the FBI are shouting and they've got weapons and badges, everything else. Just repeat, I'm not speaking with you. Or if you're more comfortable, you can say, I have nothing to say to you. My lawyer will contact you. Or even, I'm going to talk to my lawyer first, and then I'll let you guys know how I feel. If you're more comfortable with that, that's perfectly fine. Either way, that should end the conversation. Remember to get their business card because your lawyer will need that. So the next best practice is to document the situation. So immediately after the FBI leaves, you really should sit down and write down as many notes as possible right away. So the things that you want to write down are the agent's name, telephone number, what specific agency they're from. If they say the FBI, okay. If they say I'm from a joint terrorism task force or local police, whatever they say, you want to write that down. You should also write down any questions that they asked you and any answers that you gave. That's going to be really, really helpful for people in your community to know what to expect and to maybe get a sense of what the questions are going to be and what the FBI is really looking for. Also write down a physical description of the agent in case that comes up later in a future civil lawsuit if you're trying to show that the FBI conducted an unlawful search or seizure. you may need to be able to provide a description of which agent did it. So be sure you write that down. And then if there are any witnesses to the interaction, try to get their name and contact information as well. That can be helpful. If the FBI damages property of yours, let's say they have a search warrant and they bust down the door, be sure you take photos of all of the property damage as well. And we say to write this down immediately after the interaction because, we all know in that space, it can be very, very overwhelming. That's a great question in the chat about recording with a cell phone. I'm gonna talk about that in a half a second. So another option that you have is you can video or audio record the agents. So if the FBI knocks and you can hear them outside the door, they say, "We're the FBI, we need you to come out." You can immediately start video recording, audio recording the conversation. There's a few limitations to that. You cannot do something that the FBI or that a judge would consider interfering with their investigation. So the best thing to do is to stand far away, a few feet away from the agent. And if they say move or they say get out of the way, you should do that because you don't want to be accused of interfering with their investigation. Another, just a rule of thumb is you should consider your own safety. If you feel that the situation is very tense and would be escalated by attempting to film it and you don't feel safe doing that, I would not advise you to do that. I would advise you to do it as long as you feel you can video record safely, but you do have a right to do it. So if you feel you can do it safely, I strongly recommend doing it. It's very good for spreading the word and for educating other people and giving people a sense of what to expect. It's really powerful if you have a video of the FBI trying to get into your home and knocking and asking you to open the door, and you follow these steps and you say, "No, I'm not speaking to you. Give me your card, slide it under the door. My attorney will call you." If you have video of that, that's really powerful as a tool to inspire and give other people the confidence to do that same thing. So I do encourage video recording with the small exception that you don't want to put yourself at physical risk, which is something that you can decide in the moment. The next thing you want to do, the next best practice, is you want to contact an attorney immediately as soon as the FBI leaves. You may think, I don't plan to talk to the FBI. I haven't done anything illegal and I'm not under arrest. So why do I need a lawyer? I don't plan to call them back. I don't need a lawyer. Or the agents may even tell you, "Hey, don't worry, you don't need a lawyer. We're not accusing you of anything. You're fine." Ignore all of that. You absolutely want to call a lawyer. No matter what happens, no matter whether you never speak to them again or you do decide you want to call them to ask why are they messing with you, either way, you're going to be better off if you have an attorney. Here's why. Once you tell your attorney what happened and you give them the agent's contact information, there are two super significant ways that your attorney can help you right off the bat. The first thing is your attorney can shield you from the FBI's harassment. So usually once you find an attorney and you let them know what's going on and you give them the agent's contact information, the first thing they'll do is call the FBI agent, and they won't reveal any of your information. They will say something to the effect of, "My name is Collin Poirot," or whatever the attorney's name. "I am an attorney representing my client, so-and-so," your name, "and I am calling to put you on notice that my client does not wish to speak with you without me present. And if you need to contact them in the future, you are required to go through me." So your attorney can be a shield for you so that the FBI doesn't just show up every day, standing outside your house waiting for you and trying to scare you and intimidate you. Your attorney can say, "If you have any reason to contact my client from now on, you are required to contact me," which is really helpful, even for just peace of mind. And it puts the FBI on notice that you are resisting, you are exercising your rights, you are represented by an attorney, and that you're fighting back against their attempt to intimidate and politically repress your organizing. A phone call from your attorney is the best way to stop the FBI from coming back to your house or trying to contact you again. They may still try to do that, but legally speaking, they would be required to tell your attorney from that point forward. The second immediate benefit, why I really, really say no matter what your plan is strategically, you should call an attorney, is because your attorney can also help you gather information. So in that phone call, they might say something like, "I understand you approached my client and you asked to speak to my client. They're currently deciding whether they wish to speak with you, and I need to know a few more things before I can advise them." They can say that even if you have no intention of speaking with them. Your attorney can still say, "Oh yeah, we're considering it." And in that conversation, sometimes the FBI is willing to tell your attorney very useful information, like, they'll say, this is why we approached your client. This is the evidence that we are currently looking at. These are the crimes we're investigating, or, we just want to know more about your client's affiliation with a specific organization, whatever. Your attorney can get that information much more safely than you can. The FBI is probably not going to tell you, but they may tell your attorney once they're trying to convince your attorney to advise you to have that conversation. They're more inclined to share information. And that's a great way to shift the power balance between you and the FBI. So remember, your attorney can have this conversation with the FBI without revealing a single thing about your intentions, politically, legally, strategically. And even if you have decided you are definitely not speaking to the FBI, your attorney can still call them and try to get that information. In reality, there truly is almost never an advantage to speaking with the FBI, even with an attorney present. Because the FBI can make you all sorts of promises and guarantees. They can say, oh, if your client gives us X information, we can guarantee that, we're not going to harass their family, or we'll give them XYZ legal benefit. There's no law requiring them to follow through with that. They can promise you the world and then give you nothing. That's how imbalanced this power relationship is. And yeah, the FBI would absolutely lie, but they're not. To an attorney, they should not be lying to your attorney. With an attorney, it's different. They would just be reluctant to provide information if they didn't want to provide information. But they're usually not going to just lie straight out to your attorney. But either way, it is a way to get more information. And just to help you find an attorney, there's a few resources that I included on here. As I mentioned, the National Lawyers Guild is nationwide. We have chapters all over the country. So you can go to the website that I put on the slide, and you can see what is the nearest chapter. I know there's a chapter specifically for St. Louis. I know there's a bunch of chapters in Florida as well, and they can usually connect you with a people's attorney who can assist with your legal defense. You can also Google your local bar association, which is your local association of licensed attorneys. They are often in a position to connect you with a criminal defense attorney or someone someone who can help you. Lastly, there are probably other activists in your movement and in your area that have had these similar issues, and it's good to ask them if they have any good attorneys they would recommend. And then the fourth best practice that I wanted to just briefly say is alert your community. So once you've had a chance to gather your thoughts, you've made your notes about what's going on, you should absolutely inform people you organize with, people from organizations that you guys work with, anyone else who you think would benefit from this information or who the FBI might approach. You should immediately start spreading the word if you feel safe doing so, because the more aware people are that the FBI is in this neighborhood asking people about this kind of an event or this kind of an organization, the more confident they'll be, the more comfortable they'll be, and the more prepared they'll be if the FBI does approach those people. And this is just a photo of an example. This is a press conference that we had with the December 12th movement in Brooklyn that was mentioned earlier that I spoke at. And then the next slide is just a quick note that I wanted to include before I wrap up about warrants and searches, because this is something that kind of misunderstood. So the 4 steps that I just went over, the 4 best practices, those are going to be useful no matter where the FBI approaches you, in your home, your office, your car, anywhere else. But I also wanted to say this about warrants for arrests and searches, which are really important if they're approaching you at your home, if the FBI comes to your house. The best thing you can do if you get approached in your home is to refuse to open the door without a valid warrant. If the FBI knocks and says, "Hi, can we come in?" The answer is always nope, not without a warrant, because you should never voluntarily open the door to an FBI agent. If they have the right to go in your home, they're going in whether you let them in or not. You gain nothing by voluntarily letting them into your home. You are always in a better position with the door closed and the agents on the other side of the door than once you've opened the door and they're sitting in your living room. So again, if the agent says, "Hi, hope you're doing well, just want to come inside and ask you some questions," you say, "Nope, not without a warrant," or "I do not consent to this search and I'm not opening the door." They may force their way in, whether or not they have a warrant, but you're setting yourself up for a much better court case down the line if you verbally say, I'm not letting you into my home without a warrant. Don't physically stop them from going in, because you will very likely be injured, and it's probably in your best interest to not physically stop them. But if it is an illegal search and you can show that you did not consent, you may be able to stop them from using anything they find in your house in a later court case. If they do say we have a warrant, you should, again, don't open the door. Ask them to hold it up to the peephole, or if there's a window right near the door, they can hold it up to the window, or they can slide it under your door if you have a little bit of a gap. You definitely want to see the warrant before you open a door. The warrant must have a few things to be valid, and the FBI shows up with invalid warrants a lot. This, just because they say they have a warrant and it says warrant at the top, does not mean it's valid. Doesn't mean you have to do a single thing. To be valid, the warrant has to be signed by a judge. It has to specifically identify the premises that they're going to search and the time of day that it can be searched, as well as other identifying information. If it's an arrest warrant, make sure it has your name and all of your information correct. Because if they don't have a warrant, they're not getting in. They should not, you should never allow them into your home without a warrant. A final note to consider is just about shared spaces. So if you have roommates, or if if they approach you in a community space, your consent is required for them to search any of your private spaces. So if let's say you have a roommate, but you have separate bedrooms, your roommate is home. The FBI approaches, your roommate hasn't had this training and says, okay, sure, you can, I'll talk to you guys. They come in. A roommate can consent to a search of the living room, kitchen, hallways, shared spaces, but they cannot consent to a search of your bedroom unless you share that bedroom with someone else. If you have a partner that you live with, or a roommate who shares a bedroom, then they could also consent to a search of that bedroom. So you want to be really clear ahead of time about which spaces are public and private, and you really want to make sure that your private spaces are treated as private. That's the best way to set yourself up for a future legal argument that the search was illegal. So if you're a renter, if you're renting an apartment from a landlord, you will want to check your rent agreement, your lease, to see what rights are spelled out in the lease. It should clarify whether the landlord has the right to consent to, or to allow people into your apartment. But that'll be specified in the lease. And again, if you live with a roommate, be sure to talk to them about the importance of not consenting to a search. And say, you definitely don't consent to them searching my room, but also don't consent to them searching the living room or the kitchen, because that could hurt you, even if your roommate considers themselves to be non-political. And then the final slide from my presentation, the last thing, is just to wrap up. Again, these are the key points. If there's just quick 4 steps that you should always remember if the FBI shows up, this is the way to keep yourself as safe as possible, to help your movement stay as strong as possible. And it puts the FBI on notice that you have a strong defense, you know your rights, and they should not continue to try to harass you or intimidate you because you're not standing for it, and they're not going to be successful. And so I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that you all do feel at least a little bit more prepared for what to do when the FBI comes knocking. And thank you again for having me. Hands off Uhuru, hands off
Hands
Africa.
off Africa, yeah.
Fist up.
Fight back.